Of all the cases that we've covered so far on this channel, this is one of the worst ones that we have ever seen. It's a sad, senseless and tragic case of 3 innocent lives that was taken for no good reason. The subject matter we are about to discuss is disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Oba Chandler was born on October the 11th of 1946 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was the 4th of 5 children born to Oba Chandler Sr. and Margaret Johnson. Oba's father committed suicide in the family home in 1957 by hanging himself in the basement. Oba Jr. showed his first signs of mental illness at the funeral when he jumped into his father's grave when it was being lowered into the ground. In the years to come, young Oba began to go further and further out of control. By the time he was 15, he had already been arrested over 20 times for a wide variety of petty crime including auto theft. He was constantly in trouble at school, that is, when he would even bother to show up. As an adult, he was charged with a variety of crimes, including possession of counterfeit money, loitering, burglary, kidnapping, and armed robbery among other things. He was even caught masturbating while peeping through a woman's window. Chandler and an accomplice also broke into a couple's home and held them at gunpoint. After robbing them, Chandler told his partner to tie the man up and took the woman into the bedroom where he made her strip to her underwear, tying her up. He then rubbed the barrel of his gun across her stomach. To say the least, Oba was a waste of human oxygen. Many years later, the sick and twisted Oba would cross paths with a woman who was on her first real vacation with her daughters, and it would prove to be their last, and the beginning of their sad demise. On May 26 of 1989, Joann Rogers, who went by the name of Jo, and her 2 beautiful daughters, Michelle who was 17 and Christy, who was only 14, decided to take a much-needed break from their dairy farm in Wilshire, Ohio. Although Jo was happily married, her husband couldn't leave the farm because someone needed to stay behind to take care of all of the animals, so she kissed her husband goodbye and loaded up her daughters for what they thought would be a short vacation to Florida to see Disney World and to enjoy some time on the beaches of Florida. They had never been on vacation, so I'm sure their trip had to be a really exciting time for them. If only they had known what was in store, they would have surely stayed home. After visiting Disney World, they began their return trip home, and on June 1st, they became lost somewhere along the way. They weren't in any real hurry to get home, so they decided to visit the beach at nearby Tampa. This is where authorities believe they first crossed paths with the sick and demented Oba. In their car, written on the back of a brochure, they found directions to a boat where someone had offered to take them on a sunset cruise of the bay. None of them had ever been on a boat before, and Oba, by this time, was an innocent, grandfatherly type of fellow, at least by his looks anyway. They had no idea what kind of danger they were in. They were very naive and trusting of this older-looking man. When the police found their photos in one of the daughters' cameras, they seen 17-year-old Michelle sitting on the floor of their hotel room. That allowed police to know that they had at least made it back to their hotel before heading out to meet whoever owned the boat. After investigating the photos found in the hotel room, they learned that they had probably left to meet whoever owned the boat at around 8:30 to 9 p.m. They were seen leaving their hotel at around 7:30 on the last night they were seen alive, and the night before their bodies were found floating in the bay. At the time though, they had the brochure with his handwriting on it and directions, and even a description of his boat, but they didn't know exactly who they were looking for just yet. The first body was found when several people on a sailboat was crossing under the Sunshine Skyway. The second body was seen floating off the pier in St. Petersburg, 2 miles north of the first. While the Coast Guard were recovering the second body, a call about a third, which was seen floating 200 yards to the east, was received. All 3 bodies were found floating face down, bound with a rope around the neck, and naked below the waist. Autopsies revealed all 3 of the women had water in their lungs, proving they had been thrown into the water while they were still alive. 17-year-old Michelle had even freed one of her hands, and was trying to escape, but was still pulled down by the weight of the concrete blocks. The lack of bikini bottoms made it very obvious to police what the motive was. However, their identities wouldn't be known for another week. Even though the investigators knew who the women were fairly quickly, it took them 3 years to solve the whodunit. The tip that finally helped solve the case was a 24-year-old tourist from Canada who survived a very similar experience, 2 weeks before the Rogers murders. Upon hearing of the murders, she came forward with a description of her attacker and his boat. It led authorities to Oba Chandler. He was arrested for the murders on September 24, 1992. As it turned out, Oba admitted that he had seen the license plates on the Rogers vehicle, and had probably claimed to be from the same state they were to build their trust and friendship, which is how he most likely lured them out onto the boat. Once he built up their trust, he got them on the boat, and he took the ladies out on the bay where he held them at gun or knife point, and made them tie each other up. He then sexually assaulted the mother and daughters right in front of each other. You can imagine the terror and horror they must have felt, knowing what was to come, especially when he began tying the ropes to the blocks and putting them around their necks. One by one, he threw them overboard and watched them die slow and agonizing deaths. Handwriting experts later confirmed that the note found in the Rogers car was indeed Chandler's handwriting. The survivor of the earlier assault also confirmed that Oba was the one who had raped her as well, and verified that it was his boat, which was easy to remember because of its unique paint job. Another woman named Judy Blair testified at his trial that on May 15 of 1989, 2 weeks before the Rogers murders, she too was approached along with a friend. The friend declined the boat ride, but Judy accepted. Oba then took her out and tied her up and raped her on the boat, but for some reason, brought her back to shore. She lived to tell the tale. The Rogers women weren't that lucky. Oba was a suspect in other disappearances of other young female tourists as well. Also, similar blocks and rope was also found in his boat, which was one of the key pieces that sealed his fate with his coming execution. He was convicted and sentenced to death on November 15 of 2011. Chandler was executed at 4:08 p.m. at Florida State Prison in Rayford. When he was sentenced, his last remarks to the court was "Kiss my rosy red ass." Some of the jurors admitted to being afraid of him, and said that the way he would sit and stare at them with a dead stare, and his evil grin really unnerved them. As the lethal dose of drugs was about to be put into his arm, his last words were, "You're killing an innocent man." What do you all think? We'd love to hear your comments below. The only thing I can say is, rest in peace Joe, Michelle and Christy. Rest in peace.